Okay, in this video I'm going to give you some information on the Samson Stealth Glide here. I'm also going to try and help you with a few of the retrieval methods you can use when working this lure. It's a really versatile lure. It's probably the most versatile lure on the Samson range. It's the slowest sinking lure, so it can be used subsurface or on the surface equally well. So you can use this lure with a slow surface retrieve with a kind of a lazy side-to-side glide in action, or pretty much the same but just below the surface. You can also use this lure with a faster, kind of a medium or medium fast retrieve across the surface, more of a splashing nose-to-nose action. And of course you can let the lure drop down and retrieve it back up again. A few other variations on these retrieves would be taps of the rod tip, pulling it through kind of pauses, and I'm going to go over these in a little bit more detail in a minute. The smallest size is a 15 gram. This one is actually 28 grams here, and they go all the way through to 150 grams. So the Stealth Glide is going to be suitable for a wide variety of fish, including sea bass, stripers, and all sorts of fish that like to obviously hit lures, with the advantage that you can work it at different speeds. Like all Samson lures, the Glide is virtually indestructible. It's wired through, and it comes with a tail and a belly hook. Like all of the Samson lures, it's a very long casting lure, and the white is great for if you're fishing over rocks and you want to bash them up and not worry too much about them getting damaged. But we do have some airbrushed additions to the range. This is the mullet with a white belly, and this is the chartreuse white belly, and there's some others on the range that you can check out as well. I would recommend using a rod with a fairly stiff rod tip. It's just easier to work the lures that way. You don't need any exaggerated actions. So a stiffer tip is, for me, definitely a lot easier to use the lures. So the first retrieval action I'm going to talk about for the Glide is a slow retrieve, which is ideal for early mornings, evenings, or even night fishing. So that's just going to be a slow retrieve, a steady retrieve with taps side to side with the rod tip. It's just steady taps from side to side, which is going to give it a nice side to side zigzagging action across the water. Now you can also use pretty much the same action with the lure just under the surface, working the same. So both methods are effective, just depending on what you're looking for. Okay, the second retrieve I'm going to talk about is a medium or medium to fast retrieve across the surface of the water. Now this is an ideal action for, say, mid-morning. The slower actions are going to be ideal for early morning and evening, but when you need to speed things up a bit, make a little bit of a splash across the surface, this action is ideal. So you're looking to get that nose moving fast from side to side, creating a little bit of a splash there, a nice disturbance across the surface. And the way to do that, well, I'd say the best way to do that is with the rod tip up, with a steady retrieve and little taps of the rod tip. Just steady little taps, keep that rod tip up, and just work that lure across the surface. It's going to be a faster action with the nose from side to side, splashing across the surface, say medium to fast speed. Okay, the next action we're going to talk about is pulls of the rod tip. Now this is giving like an injured or a fleeing bait fish, so you can work this lure now on the surface or just below, or a little bit of both, just with pulls of the rod tip, like it's trying to get away or like it's looking injured. So it's kind of a steady retrieve with maybe 1 or 2 pulls. They don't need to be too exaggerated pulls. I mean, you can if you really want. So you know, it's worth trying different pulls to the rod tip. If you're out in open water, some hard pulls to the rod tip can be really effective, especially when you've let that lure drop down a little bit deeper. But whilst it's just working, say, about 10 centimeters below the water, it's good to give a couple of taps to the rod tip, wind up the slack, another couple of taps to the rod tip, and you can give it that kind of darting action through the water. It can also be effective adding pauses to this. So you're going to do some hard pulls, pause, let it drop down a little bit further, and then some more hard hits of the rod tip and another pause. So just mixing it up basically and seeing what's working on the day or for the species that you're fishing for. So you can also let this lure drop down. So if you want to test the different water columns and see if the fish are down deeper, you can let it drop down. And a good technique would be sweeps of the rod tip and taps, pulling it back up to the surface. So when you're retrieving the glide, like other lures on the Samson range, I think it's very important to keep contact with the lure. Don't give it too much slack, especially if you're fishing in some surf. You will need to wind up the slack if a wave hits it and keep contact with the lure. And that for me is the best way of avoiding losing the lure. And of course, if you've got contact with the line, with the lure, you can feel it, you can work that lure much easier. Well, I hope this video helped and give you a few ideas on how you can work this lure. Finally, I would say it's really important to try as many different methods as you can. If one method's not working, if the slow retrieve's not working, definitely try speeding it up, splashing it across the surface a little bit faster, sending out those distress signals, because that can really be the difference between getting a hit and not getting a hit. Yeah, and if you've got any questions, just leave them below and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer them. So thanks for watching and best of luck.